Hello, everybody. I'm David Kent. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Northumberland Learning Connections Programming Committee, and very happy to welcome you all here on a Thursday night, on a game night. So it's great to see everybody here. A night of the third of 16 wins for the Leafs. And we're here for the fifth session of NLC's series on digital futures, AI, algorithms, ethics. And tonight, as you can see from the screen, we have a talk on the truth about facts, all about misinformation and disinformation in the digital age. And we have Kathy English, who's going to speak to us about that. Now, we started programming this whole series in the fall, and in the fall, there was some guy named Biden in the White House. There was somebody named Trudeau at Rideau Cottage. And apparently neither of those two things is true now. There's a lot of other things that are true. We did not know that there would be an election campaign when this talk would happen. So we thought it was timely back then. It's bursting to ripe right now. And so we are very fortunate to have Kathy English here today to speak to us about this. Kathy is the chair of the Canadian Journalism Foundation. She was the public editor for the Toronto Star for 13 years. She was on the faculty of what is now TMU, which was then the Ryerson School of Journalism. And she was a working journalist on 6 different dailies, not all at the same time, including the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star. So she is well positioned to talk to us on this subject. She's also a lifelong Leafs fan, but is giving up her evening today. I think it's because she assumes they'll win. I took the lifelong Leafs thing as meaning that she's had 57 years of misinformation from the Leafs front office about this being the year. And so if anyone is prepared to deal with the subject of misinformation, it's got to be her. So Kathy, without any more.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I really appreciate your introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, particularly on a night when the Leafs are playing. I'm really happy to be here in lovely Cobourg. Believe it or not, never been here before, but happy to be here to speak to a group of informed, interested citizens about a pressing issue that has such profound implications for our democracy, our society, and our daily lives. In an era when we're more connected than ever before, we're also more vulnerable to false and misleading information that can distort our understanding of the world, erode trust in the institutions that we depend on, that we turn to for our daily lives, and weaken the foundations of our democracy. Okay. In today's digital landscape, disinformation and misinformation pose significant challenges. What I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to try and define the terms. What is the distinction between misinformation and disinformation, and does it even matter? I'm going to share some historical context with some Canadian examples, and talk about why this is a dangerous digital phenomena, and a subject dear to my heart, how facts and quality journalism can serve as somewhat of an antidote to this growing problem. I also hope to leave you with some ideas about what each of us can do to push back against this tide of information pollution and protect the integrity of public discourse and our information ecosystem. So a little bit about me. This is me in the public editor's office. You'll notice this was a common question. How did this happen? I fell in love with newspapers when I was 18 years old, when I got a job in my local newspaper, the Brantford Expositor, and what I fell in love with was the idea of being the person responsible for sharing facts with people, that I found out something and it was my job to share it. In my 13 years as the Star's public editor, I had the privilege of interacting with tens of thousands of readers about their concerns and their complaints. And I'm happy to say that one of them, Mr. Tom Groot, is with us today. And quick little story. Tom and I emailed back and forth for years and years, and tonight's the first time I actually met him in person, so one of my regulars. I've launched websites for 3 media companies and watched this whole digital transition happen over the last 20 some odd years. So, what about you? Is this you? Are you telling yourself and others, I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who to believe anymore. If that's the case, you're absolutely bang on. You should be skeptical. We are in the midst of disinformation, misinformation, fake news, fake photos, fake ads. The reality is that anyone with a phone can use generative AI, artificial intelligence, to create fake stuff in minutes. All of this is a threat to our democracy, and a huge threat as this has been a moving target. As I started this presentation a couple months ago, every week there's been something I could add to it in regard to our election, because our election is really ground zero for misinformation, disinformation right now. In fact, over a quarter of Canadians told pollsters recently that they've already seen fake political content online in this election. I'd just like to do a quick show of hands. Do you believe you've seen fake content during this election campaign? Do you question whether everything you've seen is factual? Okay, we'll get to that. So this is where we are today. This is a quote I like from the founder of Wired magazine. Truth is no longer dictated by authorities, but it is networked by peers. For every fact, there's a counterfact, and all of these counterfacts and facts look identical online, which is confusing to many people. We live in a world now where we can't agree on what the facts are. People have made their opinions the facts and believe that that is the truth. And as a former US Senator, Daniel Moynihan famously said, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. But how do we discern facts in a digital world? It is a fact that the advent of the internet and social media has transformed how information spreads. I'm sure we're all aware that we face challenges in distinguishing between understanding of what is a fact, what is just someone's opinion, what is made up, what is truth. This evolution has facilitated the rapid dissemination of false information, making it challenging for all of us to discern fact from fiction. If you are one of those people who said, I don't know what to believe, you're in good company. And of course, we live in a world ruled by algorithms. The social platforms, TikTok, Meta, Facebook, X, Twitter, employ algorithms to sort through trillions and trillions of bits of information. All the information in the world, some would say, both information past and present. And those algorithms decide what you see. And often, we don't see the same things. We're seeing different things because each of our algorithms has delivered something different to us. In truth, we have little or no insight into how each platform company is sorting and delivering information. It's an unregulated field. There's little transparency into the internal workings of these systems. In fact, a small number of people who are unelected and unaccountable control what we see in the digital space. Many believe we need regulation to make sure all citizens gain equal access to quality information. We're not there yet. The Europeans are further ahead than us, and it has been kind of an ongoing issue in Canada, and we'll see what happens with the new government. We can, of course, indulge in philosophical discussion for many, many hours about whether there's actually such a thing as truth. And some would argue that we're well past that point. In 2016, remember that was the year that Donald Trump became president, the Oxford Dictionary selected post-truth as its word of the year. Post-truth posited the idea that feelings, identifications, anxieties, and fantasies mattered more than facts. The word had been around for a few decades or so, but according to Oxford, there'd been a spike in frequency of usage since Brexit, and then an even bigger spike during the 2016 presidential election. And certainly that period of time was when we started talking about misinformation, disinformation, when we realized that we had this perfect confluence of the problem of technology and information. It's not news to tell you we are also in the midst of a deep global crisis in trust in information, and well, we should be. The platforms amplify misinformation and disinformation, spread lies, make little distinction between facts and opinion. Social media platforms, which is where most of us get our information these days, facilitate the dissemination of false information. And this ease of sharing, you know, click share, click like, this is the basis of the problem online. A 2022 Statistics Canada survey on people in their communities found that almost 3/4 of Canadians reported having seen content online that they believed to be false or inaccurate in the previous year. In 2023, over 2 in 5 Canadians thought it was becoming harder to distinguish between true and false information. Not surprisingly, there's a generational divide in how we get our news. 57% of Gen Z Canadians, which I think is kind of up to age 24, regularly get their news from social media platforms. Only 18% of boomers in Canada report using social media regularly for news. That was a report from July 2024. That only 18% seems low to me. And I don't know if they made a distinction between getting news from news websites online. All of this has resulted in an increase in polarization. Polarized audiences are increasingly retreating to their favorite news sources, largely driven by the algorithms that give them more of what they want, because the more you look at something, the more you're getting more of same. It's this cycle of getting what you looked at. A Government of Canada report said this leads to more polarization. When fact-checking information, individuals can fall victim to confirmation bias. We agree with what we see, we agree with what we think, which is the tendency of a person to seek and assign greater importance to information that supports their existing beliefs. Think about whether you do that. If you believe something because it confirms your beliefs, you think it's true, so it must be a fact. I just want to leave you thinking about that. I just want to tell you a little bit about the history of how we came to these terms. I don't think any of us were talking about misinformation and disinformation 10 years ago. But in 2017, the Council of Europe commissioned a report recognized that this was a growing problem and coined the term information disorder. It recognized that propaganda, attempts to mislead, had been with us for some time, but the problem was growing and exacerbated by our digitally connected world. It put misinformation and disinformation on a continuum, with misinformation being the least harmful, disinformation being false content, manipulated content. We're going to talk more about these meanings. And it coined something called malinformation, which is hate speech, leaks that harm people. We don't talk a lot about that now, but there's certainly lots of examples. So to effectively combat misinformation and disinformation, we should understand the terms. Misinformation refers to false or misleading information that is shared without malicious intent. So if your favorite news site makes a mistake, that's actually misinformation. If they publish or broadcast something that's wrong, it's misinformation. But there's no intent there. It's a human mistake. And hopefully, if they're doing their job properly, they're going to correct the misinformation, correct the mistake. Disinformation is there's intent. It is done, it is created for malevolent reasons, to take down people, to hurt people, to spread lies. It's really the bad stuff. But what you'll find, and you'll see even in some of the news clippings I'm going to show you, that the terms are used interchangeably. We talk about misinformation, we talk about disinformation without really understanding the distinction. And I think that's okay, as long as you know that disinformation, the intent is the bad stuff. When someone intends to mislead, that's much worse than just making mistakes. AI, and I think you've done some sessions on AI, AI is making all of this worse. We just can't keep up with it. The rapid rise and adoption of artificial intelligence makes all of this more complex. It makes it easier to mislead through bots, bot networks, and deep fakes. And let me explain some of those terms. Bots are fake personas created online. So a fake Twitter persona. And they're often, thousands and thousands of them are created and bought by campaigns to flood the platforms to create a false narrative. This games the algorithm, makes the algorithm believe that something's important. If you're constantly clicking on information that is bot-driven, it becomes real. Mainly because you are interacting with it, because we're interacting with it. And that, again, it's the effect of the algorithm. So it makes the disinformation look like it's news, looks like it's valid information, because so many are sharing it. I think that it's been shocking to me to see how bots operate, and the fact that you can, I used to spend a lot of time on Twitter. It's just a garbage dump now, so since I've left the newsroom, I don't have to be on it all the time. But it's fascinating when you see something and try and determine, is that real? Is that real people? And those who study misinformation, particularly at the academic level, they have all kinds of tools to find out whether it is a real person or whether it's part of a bot network. So in 2016, that term fake news was popularized. And I remember it was Donald Trump's first press conference. He was being asked a question, and Jim Acosta of CNN asked him a question, and Trump looked at him and he said, "I'm not going to answer that question. You are the fake news." I was in the public editor's office at that point. I had never had, I've dealt with a lot of complaints and concerns from readers. I'd never heard that term. Within a week, I started getting letters from readers, lots of nasty ones, using the fake news term. You are the fake news. So Donald Trump popularized a term that was really an academic term. He popularized it, he turned it into something malevolent, turned it against journalists, and journalists hate that term. But that term doesn't begin to cover. If you know, you're having a conversation with someone who said, "I don't believe that, that's fake news," be really careful with that term. Most of what we're seeing sometimes isn't even fake. It's genuine, it's used out of context, it's weaponized by people who know that falsehoods based on a kernel of truth are more likely to be believed and shared is the critical word. Most of it can't be described as news even. It's rumors gone viral, it's memes, it's manipulated video, it's hyper-targeted dark ads, and old photos reshared as new, and increasingly, photos that are made up using generative artificial intelligence. So please beware of the term fake news and know that this is not a discussion about fake news. Disinformation is dangerous to our democracy. For the second consecutive year, the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Reports of 2025 has identified disinformation as the most significant short-term global risk that could destabilize democratic institutions. The most significant global risk. Polarize societies and erode trust in truth. Simply put, disinformation is created to deceive individuals and degrade public discourse. The goal is simple: create doubt. See enough false stuff and you'll never know what's a fact, what's true. Maybe you'll stop trying to tell the difference and just believe your own facts or beliefs masquerading as facts. Disinformation sorry, we often call it disinfo, is calculated to create confusion and distrust, leaving all of us to question what is a fact and what can we believe. Misinformation and disinformation are pressing challenges today in our country, impacting democracy, public health, and social cohesion. Disinformation absolutely undermines democratic processes, as we'll see, leading to confusion among the public. It poses significant risk to public health, as false information can lead to harmful behaviors. By understanding disinformation, hopefully we can take some action to foster a culture of facts and fact-based journalism. So we need facts. Facts matter. When citizens lose trust in the media, government, and experts, and remember, there is a war on experts now. There are disinformation campaigns targeted against experts. Take a look at what's going on in the US in the health field, which we'll get into in a moment, particularly those related to the political and economic realms. So, none of this is really new. A few years ago, I sat through a conversation from someone who, the Chief Librarian of Canada, of the archives, taking us back to some of the propaganda from Confederation on. Disinformation was once probably the same thing as propaganda. The critical difference was we didn't have the digital tools to make it easily shared. It's the digital distinction that matters here, the quickness, the reach that the digital realm gives us. But still, there's some good examples of propaganda. One historic example was the 1917 conscription election, which pitted the pro-conscription Conservatives under Robert Borden's Union government against Sir Wilfrid Laurier's Liberal Party. The Union Party had a poster which depicted Laurier and the Liberal Party expressing sympathy for the Kaiser of Germany. That's something right out of the playbooks of what we're seeing right now. Another example was during the Quebec sovereignty referendum, where misleading claims about economic consequences were widely circulated. Similarly, the 1988 free trade election was rife with propaganda on all sides. I was working in the newsroom at that point. There were fears all along that if Canada signed a free trade agreement, we would lose our healthcare system, that the US would make sure Canada didn't have its highly respected healthcare system. I think one of the interesting things about history is that history tells us that misinfo is often spread from the top, that traditionally it was politicians and their representatives, not the bad actors from foreign places, who spread disinformation, misinformation for their own nefarious political purposes. I think there's probably a great thesis to be written on comparing some early propaganda to today's disinformation. Political disinformation campaigns have become increasingly common. The dangers have been cited in government reports. They become increasingly sophisticated, especially during elections. And this last month has really shown us that. These campaigns often aim to confuse voters, to manipulate public opinion regarding candidates and policies. It has become worse than ever, as evidenced by what we're seeing. So I want to take a look at some recent headlines. And again, point out that in 2019, the 2019 election, Post reports found that domestic and foreign actors attempted to influence Canadian voters by amplifying divisive narratives. So we know this is happening. We have lots of factual evidence to show that it's happening. This was 2018, 19. This was the 2019 election. So the Toronto Star at that point appointed 2 reporters just to report on misinformation during the election campaign. And one of the things they found was a Buffalo website that was publishing false information. And the website was set up to look like a real news website. I think it was called the Buffalo Courier. And it was saying all these horrible things about Trudeau and lies. There were things, there was no basis in fact of anything they were saying. But it was being spread so much that what it would do, it would move from the Buffalo Courier to Facebook. And then, oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to share this with Uncle John. He's going to be interested in this. And then it's Thanksgiving dinner, and Uncle John saying, well, did you see what Trudeau did? It had no basis in fact, none whatsoever. It was made up stuff. The Toronto Star reporters tracked down the owners of the website, who basically laughed and said, you can't do anything about this. This is First Amendment free speech rights here in America. You can't touch us. So at the outset of the US election, the Globe, one of the early stories, warned us that foreign disinformation is a looming threat in Canada's election. Here's where it might come from. So we're moving into the foreign disinformation. China, India, Russia, United States. Disinformation is serving the purpose of upending our democracy for their purposes. This was a report saying that the April election is especially vulnerable to disinformation campaigns because of recent tensions in Canada-US relations. Sometime around this time, I was on a call with someone from NATO, from NATO's disinformation unit, and it scared the heck out of me to know how deep and widespread some of this was, and how helpless we are as a society to deal with it. 2 weeks ago, we were warned, this was CP24, federal election officials are warning of disinformation tied to the election debates. Then The Logic, which is a technology, really reputable, great technology website in Canada, reported that a network of X accounts is targeting Canada ahead of elections. So what they were doing was artificially amplifying the misinformation, disinformation about Canada's economy and leadership. And this was showing that one piece of information would be shared among a number, among these bot networks. So it would be a piece of fake information, false news, but it was being shared as if it was real. Then we got The Logic the next week reported that Facebook is being flooded with deep fake news reports about Mark Carney. Deep fakes are what uses artificial intelligence to create something out of nothing. So it can put words in people's mouth. You have deep fake video. Deep photos can be created. We are so far beyond Photoshop. What can be created? Is anyone here playing with AI, with ChatGPT? I've just played with it in terms of, make up a photo about such and such for me. It's really quite scary what it can do. Then just this week, the New York Times reported that news is blocked on, because news is blocked on Meta, Meta is Facebook, we're getting hyper-partisan, misleading content from popular right-wing pages such as Canada Proud, that it is thriving on Facebook. Here's an example of one. So this is shared on Facebook. So it's a meme that's been created saying, after being caught lying about his connections with China and snapping at a journalist, Mark Carney has put his campaign on pause for the third time of the election. He's terrified of the truth coming out. There's nothing to this. It said that he was suspending his campaign after a controversy over China. He was suspending his campaign for a legitimate reason, which I'm forgetting what it is right now, but it was something that he had to do. Was it the budget? Tariffs, right, yes, the tariff talks. Yes, that's, of course, how could I forget that? So this type of, and how many of you are on Facebook? How many of you know that news organizations are not allowed to share real news on Facebook? Okay, so Facebook has ended all official mainstream news on Facebook. So what we get instead is this hyper-partisan information that's become a staple on Facebook and Instagram. And maybe you've seen it, and it's really increased since Meta stopped surfacing Canadian news as a result of Bill C-18. The result is what the director of Canada's Media Ecosystem Observatory calls a continued spiral towards disinformation and division for Canada's online ecosystem. So real news doesn't get shared, made up. Disinformation is easily shared, and there's nobody to stop it. So that's the political realm. I want to just move a little bit into the health realm. And I think, we could talk all night about the political issues. What I hope that we leave tonight with is some sense of being able, as every individual in this room, every individual fights back just a little bit to say, no, I don't think that's a fact. What's your proof of that? What's the evidence of that? So, of course, accuracy matters when it comes to health information. And mis and disinformation are having serious consequences for public health and safety, especially during public health crises, as we have come through, where false claims can lead to harmful behaviors and resistance to scientific research. There's a war on science, and it's being fueled by disinformation. There were so many, this was a big problem during COVID, and I think we all really came to understand the impact then. False narratives surrounding COVID-19, including its transmissions, its treatments, spread rapidly and misled the public. Misinformation around vaccines led to vaccine hesitancy, impacting public health efforts to control the pandemic. The Lancet, which is the reputable historical journal of the medical world, said this: the COVID-19 pandemic marked a turning point. The sense of anxiety and urgency, coupled with the rise in the use of social media and politically charged interpretations of the pandemic, fostered the spread of a series of misleading claims about the virus and medical countermeasures. Health information was weaponized as propaganda, exploiting fear, undermining public trust, and hindering collective action in critical moments. This was the Lancet did a front page editorial on this, I think in February, really trying to draw attention to the dangers. And Canada's medical establishment is equally concerned. Last month, the Canadian Medical Association released its Health and Media Tracking Survey and said, if we were to face another health crisis, like another pandemic, the current level of health misinformation would be potentially catastrophic. Is measles going to be the health catastrophe? We don't know. Is there something else coming? The fact that the medical establishment is this concerned is concerning to me. And we're also seeing a great rise in climate disinformation. Surprise, surprise. There is a global intentional dissemination of false information related to climate change and climate action. It can take many forms, from hard denial and conspiracy theories, to softer, more insidious disinformation that seeks to muddy the waters by claiming that climate change isn't really man-made, or it's not as bad as the scientists are saying, and therefore requires no urgent action. Climate disinformation threatens to undermine trust in science, weaken public support for climate action, and hinder policy implementation and international cooperation on climate change. I think that we can also see here in the past 100 days that this is a great example of people at the top spreading some of this, that all of the climate science that was generally accepted, that has been scientifically considered scientific evidence, is now in question. And I'm not saying questioning is not a good thing, but the way that evidence is being disregarded takes us into the disinformation phase. So we have political risks, we have medical risks. We also have risks of social cohesion risks. There is a significant danger of disinformation and misinformation to our social cohesion. The spread of false information is creating divisions among us. It's hindering constructive dialogue and compromise, all those things that we need for civic and civil discourse. If we can't talk to one another, we can't solve any problems. If we're each operating with our own set of facts, we can't solve any problems, which I think is why this has been considered such a risk. So, what can we do? Can't leave you here feeling helpless, because sometimes it's a little helpless. So, I believe that media literacy at all ages and stages is critical. We've had media literacy in schools for many years. I think there's a grade 10 media course that is required, at least when my kids were going to school, it was required in high school. But where we often find it has to start earlier than that, and it has to go on long after that. Many educational initiatives are being implemented to raise awareness about disinformation, and they're crucial in helping us as individuals discern between reliable information and falsehoods. Media literacy is rooted in teaching and encouraging critical thinking. We talk a lot in university classes about teaching critical thinking, but I think arguably there's a need for critical thinking at every age and stage of our lives. And always, critical thinking begins with questioning, and does this make sense? Educating individuals on how to assess information critically can hopefully lead to more informed citizens and reduce the impact of disinformation. And again, one of the problems with this is we don't know what we don't know. We see something, and if we think it's true, are we going to question it? So learning to question has to become second nature in this connected world we live in now. And if you want to have some fun, I'd advise you to go to the University of Cambridge's Misinformation Susceptibility Test. This is a test, it's 20 questions that focus on asking if you think a headline is true, was it a fact, or was it made up? When it was first put out, on average, adult U.S. citizens correctly classified 2/3 of headlines as real or fake. However, this is really interesting. Younger adults are worse than older adults at identifying false headlines. And the more time someone spent online, the less they were likely to be able to tell real news from misinformation. And I like this because it runs counter to prevailing attitudes regarding online misinformation that says that it's older, less digitally savvy boomers who are more likely to be taken in. The reality is, it's the more time you spend online, the more time you spend lost in that computer or that phone, means you might be more susceptible. So I took the test for myself. I got 18 out of 20, so I knew that most of the headlines, whether they were a real news story or false news story, but I was interested because it said, their final say was, your ability to recognize real and fake news is great, but you might be a bit too trusting of the news. They got me. Anyway, you can find this, I've put the website there and I'm happy to share it, but you can find this at University of Cambridge. It's just a fun little thing to do, and even a little party game, have people play around with it. So one of the core purposes of media literacy education is to give citizens tools to differentiate between fact and noise. There's so much noise on the internet. So critical evaluation is essential for combating this issue and ensuring that you are consuming trustworthy information. So we have to develop skills to assess credibility, identify biases that could distort the facts, and question sources. So a challenge to you. Do you know how to assess the credibility and identify credibility of the information that's coming into your phone? Do you know how to assess the biases of the news that you're looking at? Are you skeptical about the information you consume? How many would tell me, how many believe they are skeptical? I hope so. We're skeptical boomers, right? You're not alone. You don't have to do this on your own. There are so many tools out there, tools, resources available for questioning information. There's reputable fact-checking sites and organizations. There are databases where we can check facts. Familiarizing ourselves with these resources will enhance our critical skills. Fact-checking organizations provide essential services by investigating claims and providing the public with verified information. And the basis of a good fact check is, how do you know what you know? What is the evidence that proves that? So here's a statement. What backs it up? Show me. Show me. It's a tell and it's a show. These organizations, they investigate claims made in the media, by politicians, online, and they seek to ensure that we receive reliable information. This work is pivotal in maintaining the integrity of information in the public sphere. And it's now all the more important now that Facebook, Meta, Twitter, they've all disbanded their fact-checking, their safety units, all those units that were set up in kind of 2015-16 when it became very clear that we had a disinformation problem. The platforms did step up at that time. In January, Meta disbanded fact-checking after having made a big public deal about having it. And it's seemingly none of that matters now, and anything goes on Facebook except for real news. We should be holding these to account. Here's an example of tools, and one of the tools that you can find. This is kind of a media literacy 101. It's out there everywhere. This was created by the Librarians of America. This was an early piece, probably 2017 or 18, how to spot fake news. Consider the source. Read beyond. Check the author. Do a quick search of the author. If you notice, most legitimate news sites now have author bios so that we can find out who is the person behind this, who is responsible for this piece of information. Are there any supporting sources? Have you checked the date? Because sometimes old information is presented as new. Is it a joke? Is it satire? Boy, I got taken in a few weeks ago. I follow a theater website because I love Broadway, and it was a story that said that Donald Trump's life story was going to be turned into a musical at the Kennedy Center. And it was so real. It said that Manuel, the guy who created Hamilton had refused to do it, so he'd gone to the guy who'd created Phantom of the Opera, and he was working on the songs, and it said and it had him quoted saying, "A very handsome person will play me." It was so well done. It was so good that I actually sent it to my theater geek daughter. I got to the very bottom and realized it was April 1st. It was an April 1st joke, but it was so well done, and I fell for it. With all I know here, I fell for it. So, again, is it a joke? And I actually wrote a column on this at the Star a few years ago when we started talking about disinformation, saying these media April Fool's stories have got to go because all they are is disinformation. Let's not fool people when we're trying to gain their trust. Check your biases. Are your own beliefs affecting your judgment of this piece? And as a librarian say, ask an expert. The Canadian Journalism Foundation, that I've been involved with for about 15 years, we got very involved in media literacy around 2017. This is an example of our Keep Truth Well campaign, which was set up to counter disinformation during the pandemic. And some of the things we said: check your gut. If something seems sketchy, it probably is. If you're just not sure, first of all, if you're just not sure, don't share. Check the claim. Copy the headline into a web search. Has it been debunked by other fact checkers? Check the source. Who's saying this? Challenge the misinformation. Call out rumors whenever you see them. And share the truth. Educate others with verifiable facts. So these are sort of, you know, we've tried to really simplify this to just make it something that becomes second nature to all of us. Our first campaign was called Doubt It, Check It. And that's the kind of the basis for media literacy. If you doubt it, check it. If you doubt it, don't share it. This is something that just launched this week. It's a new organization called Get Fact. And because I believe so wholeheartedly in information integrity, I've become involved in it on a volunteer basis and help them with sketching out all the ethical principles that they're going to work by. It's led by former CTV and global news anchor Kevin Newman, and its initiative being launched by a collective of concerned Canadians. It's a non-political group. Everyone's volunteering their time and skills. We're guided by best practices set out by the International Fact-Checking Organization. Get Fact offers a daily newsletter, a podcast, fact-checking videos, and something we're trying that I'm still a little bit skeptical about. Some former military people have built a fact-checking bot named Laura, after Laura Secord. And the way Laura operates is you can take a story, you can take some information that you're concerned about, put it into Laura, and it will come back and tell you if there's any evidence to support that as truth. So one of the things, this is literally just launching this week. I'm still skeptical, I worry, but we have very strong correction policies. We're encouraging people to tell us if they believe that Laura is wrong. Kevin also believes, and you know, there's some evidence that if people won't believe other individuals, maybe they'll believe a machine. I don't know if we're there yet, but it is part of the Get Fact experience. So this is all Canadian. It really sprang up in January when the 51st state nonsense started up, and just a sense from so many people who said, what can we do? We have to do something. So this was Kevin's first podcast, talking with Taylor Owen, the head of McGill's Center for Media, Tech, and Democracy. And Taylor's a real expert on misinformation, believe me. So we're at that part of where, what can we do? We need to work together to solve this great big problem that threatens our democracy. We need collaboration between various stakeholders: citizens, media organizations, fact checkers, tech companies, politicians, civil society. This is all crucial for effectively addressing and combating disinformation. So only joint efforts will can enhance this dissemination of accurate information. But now I want to turn to an area that's really dear to my heart, what I care most about: quality journalism. And when I say quality journalism, I mean fact-based information, evidence-based news and information. Quality journalism can be an antidote to misinformation. Strict ethical standards in journalism seek to ensure accuracy, safeguard the integrity of news reporting, and promote fairness and accountability. Adhering to these principles, we hope, will create public trust, although we all know that trust in media keeps getting lower and lower all the time, but Canada is higher than many other countries in the world, and certainly higher than the US. Allowing audiences to have some measure of assurance that they're engaging with reliable information. I hope I don't have to tell you that trustworthy journalism is essential for informing the public, for each of us to become informed citizens. Trustworthy journalism holds power to account and fosters a healthy democracy. Journalism, when it's done well, and those are the key words there, is the cornerstone of an informed citizenry that can participate in civic life. And I want to start from this premise. Journalism provides something unique to a culture: independent, reliable, accurate, and comprehensive information that citizens need to be free. Journalism matters. It matters to our communities. It matters to our democracy. And remember, the internet is not journalism. Journalism is part of an information ecosystem that can be found in the digital spaces. But it is information that is gathered and verified using professional standards and guided by accountability to the public. Just because you found it online doesn't mean it's news, doesn't mean that there's any accountability there. To be trusted, a news organization and journalists must be trustworthy. Trustworthy news and information is credible, reliable, and stands up to public scrutiny. Trustworthy newsrooms are accountable to their public. When Tom sends me a concern about a story in the Star, it's important that the Toronto Star says, yes, we will look into this. Trustworthy newsrooms operate with transparent journalistic standards and best practices in line with Canada's laws governing media. And we have great laws here in Canada. We have a libel defense called the Responsible Journalism Defense, which means that if someone is being taken to court for libel, if it's a news organization, they have to show the steps that they went through to show that that story was done responsibly. And the Supreme Court judgment on responsible journalism is just really like a mini textbook on quality journalism. So again, when it's done well, when it's done responsibly, journalism can be an antidote to disinformation. So what do Canadians say? The Polaris Strategic Insights Trusted Media Study, when asked directly about what factors build trust with media, Canadians said accurate and unbiased reporting topped the list. Only 3% say they trust a news outlet more if its views align with theirs. That said, there's a large partisan divide in trust levels toward many news outlets. Liberals are more trusting than conservatives of most media outlets, except for the National Post, Sun newspapers, the Western Standard, and Rebel Media. The largest political trust gap comes for the CBC, not surprising with that gap widening over the year. And just for interest's sake, these are the networks that Canadians trust. So the Weather Network is the most trusted network in Canada. I don't know. When the Weather Network tells me it's not going to rain and it does, I don't know. That's not good. Canadians mainly trust television news. CBC to CTV are most trusted. Globe and Mail's right up there. You can see the New York Times, an American site, which has an American news organization that's made a substantial investment in Canada, has become quite trusted. But across the board, there was another slide that across the board, trust levels have declined from the year previous. So but we're still higher than others. So what I want to say is it's your responsibility to assess the news and information you consume. Here's some things that you can look for to assess the trustworthiness of the news organizations you open your mind and hearts and increasingly your wallets to. But, by the way, only 3 in 10 Canadians currently pay for news. We're pretty low across the world. So, do they have transparency? Can you find, every time you go to a news website, look for the About Us. Who's funding this? Who's running this? Who's leading this? Are their journalistic standards clearly visible? Can you find out how to get a correction? Can you find out what are the standards they hold themselves to? Do they take accuracy seriously? If they make a mistake, and journalists are not perfect, they're only human, they will make mistakes, but do they correct their errors? That's what matters. Are there diverse voices and sources? Or is that news source going to the same old voices who are going to say the same thing over and over again? Journalism should reflect our communities. Is there a clear distinction between news and opinion? I'd say that in my 13 years in the public editor's office, the thing that I found readers were most confused about was the distinction between news and opinion. That news is fact-based, it should not have opinion. Opinion, which is the editorials on the editorial page, columnists are free to express their opinion. That's what they're paid for, to express their opinion. I think I probably told readers dozens of times and wrote it in many columns that opinion journalism by nature is not fair because it seeks to marshal an audience, an argument rather. It ignores some facts and builds up others. So knowing the difference, is this news or this opinion? And remember, most of what we see on US television in the evening is talking heads opinion journalism. It is not news reporting. And is there a clear distinction between journalism and paid content? You should never be confused on whether something is an advertisement that someone's paid for or whether it's news that's been independently gathered. So demand ethical journalism. It's up to you to hold news sources to account. Tell them, look for, are they accurate? Are they fair? Are they transparent? If they're not, complain. Complain to the editor, complain to the reporter. We have a National Press Council in Canada that will accept complaints about the media. We only get better if there is this sort of accountability. I think it's also worth knowing, though, that it's never been more challenging time to be a journalist or a news organization. Journalists face so many challenges, including threats to their safety, financial pressures that have seen the closing of so many news organizations in the last 10 years, particularly in smaller communities where that means that boards of education, town councils are not being covered, are not being held to account. And journalists are also affected hugely by the rise in disinformation because it's posing credibility questions for all of us who broker in information. When we're trying to present verified information in a world of disinformation, everyone's a suspect. So, we are reaching the end. What can you do? Support ethical journalism. That means subscribing to trustworthy, reputable news organizations that prioritize fact-based reporting and are clear on what's news, what's opinion. They're open with you. Advocate for press freedom. Press freedom matters, and it's going to be a huge issue south of the border. It is now, it's emerging. I have great fears of what that means globally, but press freedom is definitely on the table. And value facts. Facts really matter. Engage in responsible digital behavior. We can all do this. Think before you act. Many studies suggest that disinformation is shared because it carries such a high emotional charge. You see something, you go, oh, I didn't know that. It's like me sharing the theater piece with my daughter. It was that emotional charge that made me think before I acted, before I actually thought through the premise. Being cautious about the information you share online helps maintain credibility in the digital space. It's crucial to avoid spreading false information. Promote credible sources within your own social networks. Don't share something with a grandchild or a friend unless you know that it's reliable. Ask questions about what you read, what you watch and share. How do you know that? Who says? What's the evidence? Is it credible? Prove it. These are questions you should be asking about anything, but particularly anything that you share. So, in conclusion, disinformation is, of course, a pressing issue in the digital age in Canada and certainly around the world. We should be concerned and we should be scared with what AI is going to do to this. I haven't even gone there largely. However, through critical thinking, media literacy, quality journalism, and collective efforts, we can combat its effects and promote a more informed and engaged society, and hopefully a stronger democracy, which is what we all care about. I just want to But all of this can only go so far. Our continued vigilance will matter. I'd like to leave you with these closing thoughts from the head of the American Press Institute. This was again a few years ago. Whatever changes platform companies make and whatever innovations fact checkers and other journalists put in place, those who want to deceive will adapt to them. That's what we're seeing now with generative AI. Misinformation is not like a plumbing problem you fix. It's a social condition, like crime, that you must constantly monitor and adjust to. Since as far back as the era of radio, and before, as Winston Churchill said, a lie can go around the world before the truth gets its pants on. Let's keep the pants on the truth. Thank you.
Hey, Kathy, thank you so much. We have time for some questions, so we'll wander around with the microphone. And I'll come over here, but while I'm walking slowly, there was one thing to start off with. You mentioned that Facebook is now blocking links to news items, which is a result of the Canadian government at the behest of the news organizations saying that platforms had to pay if they wanted to have those links, made the choice not to pay, and therefore no links. What now, given that younger people are progressively getting their information from social media platforms, what can the traditional journalism outlets do to combat that and to get better access to younger audiences?
Oh, yeah, I think for probably at least the last 20 years, I've sat through so many seminars. Oh, sorry. So many sessions on how do we attract younger readers, both for economic reasons to the news source, but certainly for democracy reasons. I don't know. I mean, first of all, so many smaller news sites have been financially impacted by not being able to put their information on Facebook. That was how they were building an audience, was on Facebook. Now that that's gone, the impact is huge. I don't know, because Facebook does not want to come back to the table if they have to pay. I don't know if anything's going to change with a new government. Google opted to, so the Bill C-18 said to the platforms, you're using our news to sell advertising and build audience, you have to pay the news sites. Meta said, forget that, we're going away. The news sites benefit from being shown on Facebook. Google created a $100 million fund that is being distributed to Canadian journalism organizations as a way of compensating. So, you know, David, I wish I could tell you what's going to bring young people back. Is it media literacy? Is it talks like this? Is it talking at the family table? Is it parents saying, how do you know that? Certainly we know that the numbers that younger people are getting most of their information off of social media.
All right, hello, thank you for your presentation. Just a point of information for everyone concerning Facebook and posting news items. You can do this with your contact list on Facebook Messenger. You can post any news item, just copy and paste, and it'll be there. You can't put it in your news feed.
Right.
Okay, the other point I want to make when it comes to disinformation, misinformation, whether it be about COVID, climate change, elections, or whatever, some of it is clearly lies and disinformation, such as the Carney post that you put out. Other parts of it are simply different opinions. And what is important to me is that we have to develop our sense of discrimination to see what is an opinion and what is clearly a lie. And in my view, we need these opinions so that these people do post whatever they want, and sometimes it's going to be a lie, because the alternative is to have a big brother state where you're not allowed to post anything except what the government and the media tells you you can post.
Yeah, I mean, certainly press freedom issues and freedom of speech issues are critical here. And that's certainly the argument that's being used south of the border, which is one of the reasons why Meta stopped all fact-checking in January, because the new administration felt that fact-checking was censorship, yes, yeah. So these are difficult debates.
Thank you, Kathy, for your very interesting presentation tonight.
Where?
Over here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. During the session that we had regarding ChatGPT last week, the subject came up a couple of times about articles that are written supposedly by real people, but they're not. And there is a move towards having a law that would make it be a requirement that you say whether it's an AI written article or whether it's a real person. Can you comment on that?
I sure can. Last fall, I served on a global group to come up with a charter on AI in journalism, and that was led by Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa. And there was journalists from around the world who were working on this whole question of how does journalism use AI. The number one principle of our charter is that transparency. An audience always should know when anything was created by AI. Newsrooms are experimenting with it. Bloomberg is doing AI summaries at the top of a story. So a reporter will file a story. AI will create a 3-paragraph summary for readers who just want the summary. So journalism as a profession is wrestling with this, but there's so many other elements of the internet ecosystem that are not going to reveal when something was created by AI. Newsrooms have always had policies around photo, that anything that was created as a photo illustration, readers had to know that. They couldn't believe, they had to know that it wasn't something that was just, represented reality. So, these, again, where the laws intersect with this, I don't know if we'll get a law that says that, but I think it's even more impetus to who made this, where did it come from, who created it. And AI sounds so professional, you can think it is. Some news sites, there's some really awful kind of rip-off type websites in the States that are putting fake bylines on AI stories. So they're making it look like it was a person, and that person doesn't exist. So, as I said, we are entering a whole new realm of disinformation.
Thank you very much. As an individual who'd like to take a little bit of action, I'm wondering, are there alternatives to Facebook and X? Are there other platforms that I could be using?
Well, in recent months, particularly as X has gone into the toilet, there have been attempts. There's one called Blue Sky, which I know a lot of journalists are on. I played around with it for a little bit, and then I just made a personal decision that I want to spend less time on social media, so I haven't gone deep into it. Facebook has launched one called Threads, which is to take, again. So, yeah, I don't think that the new thing is there yet. Blue Sky. Yeah. I think they're going to bring the, oh, sorry.
I'm a long-term fan of Snopes, the website Snopes, as a way to check facts and accuracy. And I just want to know if you're a fan, or if you know of a site that you think is even better.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the early fact-checking websites to launch. I don't know enough about it to comment intelligently. I haven't read or sensed bad things about it. And I think that what I'd want to know is, are they part of the international fact-checking organization? Do they follow the best practices you've got me curious, I will go home and look. Do they follow, what is considered the best practices in fact-checking, which is, again, showing your work, coming to it with political neutrality and accountability?
Okay. I've been watching and listening to Zeteo.
Oh,
You don't-
yes,
And
I vaguely know who that is.
Zeteo and, okay, I'm blocking on the other. They're not so much news sites as opinions, but they certainly are very good at identifying the laws, the lies rather. And Mary Trump is also a very interesting person to listen to.
Okay, I will check out Zeteo. I did see it on Twitter a couple weeks ago, but I don't know enough about it either.
He's an Arab American,
Right.
and so he has a particular point of view. I mean, it's
Right.
not unbiased, but it's a pretty clear way of taking the lies and the stupidity of what's going on and saying, no, this is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And as long as you know that bias and you are allowing for it or you're agreeing with it, then, what you want to know is how fact-based is that opinion. Is it, are they grabbing it out of thin air, or is it just to serve a political purpose, or is it fact-based?
I'm wondering if you're familiar with the media bias charts published by Adfontes Media. They rank media organizations based on where they sit from left to right and also from trustworthy to non-trustworthy.
I
And it's a
don't think I'm
wonderful
familiar
chart.
with that one. The one I'm most familiar with, the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford puts out what they call Digital News Report every year, and they do that. They rank the trustworthiness, and they do country by country, so you get Canadian numbers. But I think there are different firms, polling firms, communications firms who do these trust in media and rankings on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
It's on? Okay. One of the things that I would have liked to have heard more about, especially from someone involved with the Toronto Star, is journalistic self-censorship. And I guess the phrase might be the suppression of those journalists who do not self-censor or self-censor. I think the results are enormous in this country, especially if you read a wide range of European articles. Just the subject area of importance, and that's what I would have expected more. And I think it has such huge implications.
Do you have examples of self-suppression?
I don't want to be the one to say it's that.
Okay.
And it's obviously disputable whether it is, but Gaza,
Okay.
Syria, and I've either been over the years to these countries, or I am continually in touch with. I was involved in the
Sure.
refugee community, with lots of constant feedback from what do you call it, on the boots or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And this goes back to 1990.
Right.
So I don't want to delve into
Sure.
to
Okay,
division.
I think I know what you're
But I've
getting
seen
at.
the results of journalists being fired, or I'm Jewish, and I've seen the bots from my own community that call up the Star and tell them, no, rephrase this.
I dealt with those a lot.
There's a lot of that stuff. It's huge.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is
Yeah.
very important in Canadian news. And I also talk to so many young people who are so alienated by that. And, I mean, that's it.
Okay. Well, first of all, the power of a news organization is what it decides to shine its light on. What does it decide to put its resources to on any given day? On any given day, there's all the stories in the world or all the news in the world and X number of reporters to cover. What does the Toronto Star in this morning's news media say is important? Is that suppression? Is that, ranking? Certainly there are topics that rarely get covered. And some of that, when I said, diverse voices, I mean, for years, women's health barely made the news because it was all men who were making the decisions about what's news today. At some point, women started to gain prominence in newsrooms, and breast cancer became a story. Motherhood became more of a story. So it's why we need diverse voices in newsrooms fighting for what they believe should be covered. I think that's probably the best I can do, but there, I certainly know there's all kinds of stuff that doesn't get covered and is, I don't know how deliberate that is. It's just like, no, that's not a Globe story. That's not a Star story.
Hi, thanks so much for this presentation. I have a kind of a two-part question. One is how we hold institutions accountable that are corroding that level of trust in all institutions. And if we look at Facebook, Meta, all of those organizations, they're a corrosive influence right now on trust. How we hold them accountable. And the second part is something that I get cranky with journalism about, is both sidesing issues where there's an overwhelming preponderance of research or knowledge on one side. So vaccination, for example, where there's an overwhelming amount of scientific knowledge that vaccination is a good thing, but journalists go out and seek fairness by ending up platforming fringe beliefs and fringe theories.
Yeah, the both sizing is like one of the ongoing debates in journalism, and certainly even when I got into journalism in the late 1970s, there was way more both siding done, and that was considered the fairness. So you would, you'd interview someone and say, on the other hand, so-and-so says this. The way I had that described to me once is that a journalist's job, if, John Smith says it's raining out, so-and-so says it's not raining. The journalist's job is to step outside and tell the reader, is it raining or not? So that's not the both-siding. My fear is we're going to get way more both-siding journalism with what's going on in the States right now. I've dealt with the vaccine story and complaints about the Toronto Star's vaccine stories a lot, and was able to say to the complainants, look, the scientific consensus is this. The world scientific community has said these vaccines are not dangerous. Am I going to still be able to do this with the environment that we see coming now? And and always on science issues, science shifts as well. How is that going to play into some of this? So I do worry a lot about some of those things at this point. Ideally, the mission at the heart of journalism is seek truth and report it. And truth is a great big word. I prefer seek facts and report them, but it's a complex world. Okay.
I'd just like to ask, in your opinion, the legacy news that we're all used to, which, the Star, the Globe, the legacy news, the CBC, do they hold, and the digital outlets, are they operating at the same standards as legacy news as we know them?
The good ones are, yes.
And we don't know who the good ones are.
Yeah, I mean, again, some of those things that I said, look for, are there bios of the reporters? Is there an About Us page? Do they tell you what their standards are? If you look for those standards, and I worked closely with an organization in the States called the Trust Project. And the Trust Project was set up in 2017 to provide digital indicators to the public on, is this a trustworthy site? And most of those things are demands of the trust project. You do all these things, and then you can carry the trust project, we call it the trusted T. You can put it on all your content to say, we do these things. We've told you who we are. We have journalistic standards. So one of the things I've done in consulting is trying to work with startup news organizations to build up their trust and transparency measures, to show their readers that, yes, we are trustworthy.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting that you're getting more into the journalist side of things than the facts themselves out there, and that's where I was thinking as well. In my past, I have had occasion to look at articles written about something I know a lot about, and I think, how could they be so crazy wrong? And then it leads me to wonder, are they right about everything else that I'm reading and I don't know anything about? Can I trust that? So it leads me to say, what qualifications or pre-qualifications do you need to get into journalism, other than wanting to be a campaigner or ultimately become a columnist with an opinion? Should there be some sort of, I mean, we touched on some of this stuff about the both siding and all that sort of stuff. So where does the journalism side get better?
That's a great question. And I think it's all important to understand that a piece of journalism is a construct. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's not going to tell you everything that an expert knows about the subject. When I taught journalism, and I taught reporting to first-year students, one of the things I say, part of your job is to become an instant expert. And sometimes that's in a day. And sometimes in the new economic environment where journalists are doing 4 and 5 stories a day, it's an hour. You know, they're making a couple calls and writing the story. So understanding that construct, understanding the very, very real limitations. If I want to know something in depth, first of all, you're going to determine what news sites might give you more depth, which are better resourced, so they have more reporters and give the reporters more time. So there's that. As for the education issue, I never went to journalism school, and I had a journalist from way back when who said to me, you know, your job as a journalist will be to explain the world to people. So take history, take geography, take economics, take politics, learn as much as you can about the world so that you have the tools to explain it. Because that's what journalists seek to do, find out information, explain it. I do worry that our journalism schools, when kids are going straight into journalism at kind of 18 years old, that they're not getting enough of that broader knowledge that a good liberal arts degree can give you. But again, there are limitations, and I've been a journalist for more than 40 years, and I'm the first one to tell you all the limitations. Be careful out there.
Well, that's quite an evening. I'm here just to do a couple of last things to wrap us up, but the first and most important is to thank Kathy for that talk. We often get insight. We had insight. We often get information. We had information. We don't always get a call to arms at the end. And so that's fantastic to get that call to action. So thank you. A couple of other things. I wanted to just a quick shout out to all of the NLC connectors. I think more than half the people in the audience are connectors tonight, which is great. That means there's about 40% of you who have an opportunity to join the 60%. And there's a table at the back if that's an amusing thought. 2 other things. Next Friday, the Victoria Hall Volunteers are presenting a talk by R.H. Thompson. I think there's flyers at the back about this. He's going to be talking about his book that came out last Remembrance Day called By the Ghost Light. It's sort of a memoir, it's sort of a family exploration, and it's an exploration of the effects of war centered on the First World War. He's not just an actor, he's a fabulous presenter, and he's really quite a remarkable person in what he's done in terms of thinking about the effects of war. So that's next Friday. Tickets are available through Victoria Hall. It's obviously at Victoria Hall, and so I encourage you to go to that. And more importantly, I encourage you to come out next Thursday to the last of our sessions on the digital futures. This one is on revolutionizing health. It'll be given by Gemma Postel from the Dalai Lama School of Health at University of Toronto. We are, I think last I checked, we were almost sold out, but we do have a handful, and I mean a handful of tickets left. So if anyone's interested, go online or otherwise see about getting those last few tickets. And with that, last I checked, it was 1-1. With that, but who, you know, and if anyone's asking, with that, I bid you all good night. Thank you very much.